The 6th ANC Policy Conference is in full swing at the Nasrec Expo Centre in Johannesburg, day 2 today. Peace and stability in the country, as well as social and economic transformation, just some of the topics set to lead discussions on day 2 of this gathering. My co-anchor, Ayanda Nyathi, is live to us there this morning. He's joined by Tumali Mohlaudi. And good morning, Ayanda. It's great to see you. A busy day on day 1 of the conference, and a lot of what was unfolding in the country, the big story around that gang rape in Krugersdorp, also making its way on the sidelines of the policy conference.
Yeah, Michelle, it's really one of those moments in this country where we have to reckon with the fact that as the ANC tries to get to the bottom of policies, ironically, that might be aimed at tackling things like gender-based violence, the police minister, who we know is an ANC-NEC member, having to wear his ministerial hat and actually leave this particular conference in order to attend to that really horrific, heart-wrenching story that unfolded there at West Village in Krugersdorp, where we understand now 67 people have been arrested after 8 women were gang raped. One of those women, we're told, a 19-year-old, was raped by 10 men in succession in that one incident. Really disturbing, to say the very least, and bringing into sharp focus once again questions around whether or not conferences like this matter in a context where these kind of discussions, many fear, the critics of the ANC will say, don't translate into material outcomes, the actual changing of the circumstances, especially for women in this country. We know the Social Transformation Subcommittee is that body within the ANC that's really going to try and get to the bottom of ways through which policy can be improved, if not implemented better, in order to ensure that at the very least you don't have a situation where such a large group of men are able to be so brazen that they go and attack a crew that's meant to be filming for such a long time without being interrupted, because they know there'll be essentially no consequence for something like that. And so part of those discussions, I imagine, are going to be around ways through which you can clamp down on that kind of behavior. But you're right, it's day 2 today, still a relatively quiet, cold Nasrec. Many of the delegates really burning into the midnight oil, so to speak. It didn't really get to midnight, but the delegates were here till quite late yesterday, and so no surprises that many of them haven't yet arrived. It gives us an opportunity to really take stock of what's taken place yesterday and how today is likely to unfold. Tumali Mohlaudi is part of our foot soldiers here at the 6th National Policy Conference of the ANC, and he joins us now. This was a hive of activity late yesterday, with some of those briefings going as late as to like 8, 9 o'clock yesterday. But let's begin with what the President had to say in his opening address. Tumali, good morning, by the way.
Good morning.
So much being said about how he was received and what he had to say about where the ANC is at as we speak.
Well, indeed, where the ANC is at in terms of President of the ANC and President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, is a place where really it's at a crossroads, and it has to really do some deep introspection. Apart from introspection, really turn things around more than just, talk. It needs to see action, decisive action, because the fear that was raised by President of the ANC, Cyril Ramaphosa, is a fear that many delegates have echoed, that the ANC is at the cusp of perhaps, even if it doesn't turn things around, losing the confidence of the electorate and South Africans. The ANC is very proud of its history, its long-standing history, over 100 years as a liberation movement, and one of Africa's biggest liberation movement turned governing party. So President Cyril Ramaphosa really encompassing that and trying to drive home that point, to say that the electorate and South Africans can ill afford any more scandals when you talk about corruption, when we talk about maladministration, when we talk about, of course, a lack of service delivery looking at the country. And again, on the issue of the ANC renewing itself, renewal being a strong point that was coming out. And what renewal speaks to is the end of an era. Which era are we talking about? State capture. Again, talking about how state capture has hurt the image of the ANC internationally. And he says investors believe in South Africa and believe in the ANC if the ANC can get itself right. So you see the President there trying to really turn things around and put a spin on what is quite a dire situation when you look at what is happening in terms of the ANC's loss in the recent local government elections, something that people did not think would happen in some metros, and you're looking at the percentages, and this speaks also to a generation that's coming up, not so akin to the liberation history, looking at the bread and butter issues, the data issues, the issues that affect their livelihoods, and how they feel that the failure of service delivery affecting them in the bottom line is something that they will vote with their feet or not vote at all, which is also something that was of concern.
I mean, what's that infamous line said, I think it might have been by the former president, who spoke about the ANC ruling until Jesus comes. So it looks like Jesus has come in certain metros. And that's certainly the reality that the ANC is reckoning with now, in a context where Cyril Ramaphosa admitted in no uncertain terms that the party is at its weakest ever. But there were also, concerns about how many delegates might arrive. Initially, we were told it was going to be around 2,000 or so. Yesterday, an update coming through. There was slightly more than that, and the ANC doesn't seem to be too concerned about that.
The ANC is certainly not too concerned about that. The ANC is saying that this shows that indeed there is still a lot of interest in terms of the interest in what the policies of the ANC are, and the publics and the delegates themselves having an interest in influencing and debating and discussing those particular policies. It shows that the ANC, in terms of turning around, still has the potential, and this is how this was framed, to say that if indeed the ANC had been on its last legs, so to speak, there wouldn't be that kind of turnout. So something of a welcoming by President Cyril Ramaphosa of that particular larger than expected numbers. I think some analysts and critics, I beg your pardon, it's a
there's a lot to be said.
There's a lot to be said there in this chilly weather. But some critics had also noted that they thought that there would be, some kind of trouble with turnout, whether, based on what we saw in some of the regional conferences and battles around contestation around registration processes, and maybe some even registration or turnout apathy. Something that the larger than expected turnout certainly suggests that there is no apathy where the delegates are concerned, because they want to turn around. Now, which kind of turnaround this is something to be debated, because there seems to be some contestation on policies and how to adopt them, and whether some resolutions of the ANC really are still relevant, and a lot of talk around that. But this is some of those issues that have been playing around here.
Without a doubt. So it's a conference that's well attended, at least by the delegates. The question becomes then, what will be the substance of the debates that take place? Much of that slog, that dog work, is going to take place today. In fact, all the sessions are closed, and you're expecting that there's going to be those sparks and fireworks behind closed doors. What do we anticipate the ANC to be discussing?
Well, we anticipate the ANC to be discussing peace and security, but also social cohesion, the issue of crime, the issue of gender-based violence, the issue of crime in general in South Africa, as we touched on just a little bit earlier, with these heinous crimes happening in Krugersdorp. And what informs that? Now, if you take a step back to this particular policy conference, when you were having those briefings about the discussion documents, the issue of trans-border crime, migration and social stability all intertwined, and this is what is essentially playing out, because you have a situation whereby there is a real scrap for resources, violent scrap for resources, but also you have social degradation. What happened in Krugersdorp is really unfortunate, whereby you also highlighted that quite succinctly, where social decline is happening, and someone would have to be, ravaged in that particular matter, causing, delegates and ministers to rush out to try and see what is happening. It shows that cross-border issues are still a major problem, because you have influx of people, something that the ANC says it didn't anticipate before, but it speaks also to the issue of what is happening in terms of policy of the borders, in terms of policy of who qualifies to get refugee status, who qualifies to get various statuses in terms of our law, and not to say that the crime is being put specifically on foreign nationals. But what is happening is that there is a misinterpretation, according to Minister Begitele, that foreign nationals are behind that. It's not necessarily the case if you look at what is happening in the courts.
It just so happens that in this particular instance, the minister yesterday did concede that the people who were arrested initially were foreign nationals, and they admitted as much. Journalists asking him about how he knows this, and he goes on to say that, well, it was through their own admission that they've said this. But even people at West Village, where this gang rape took place, have said that it's Basotho nationals that they feel are behind some of those crimes. So there is a conversation to be had around how porous our borders are.
Yes.
An issue, again, that the Home Affairs Minister has stressed multiple times.
Yes, stressed multiple times, and said that there needs to be more stronger support. But already the state, in terms of its security apparatus, certainly at that level. Of course, a few weeks ago, there was a launch of that specialized border patrol unit, and this is something that the state's trying to sort itself out. But the porous nature of the borders, particularly with the Basotho nationals and other SADC states, Swazi nationals, people just walk across the border from Swaziland into South Africa to do shopping, to visit relatives. So it's a very difficult dynamic there. But we do know specifically with what the turf was in Kagiso in the West Rand, with the Basotho nationals, the so-called Zamazamas, very violent, very aggressive culture, gun-toting. Many of the locals there saying that they fear for their lives, that they don't know what's going to happen any moment, because these Basotho nationals within themselves have ganged themselves up and are attacking the mine's resources, the leftovers thereof, and this plays out in very violent ways. And so is this a breakdown of social fabric, or is it a construct of the breakdown of our national borders and the control thereof?
Or a mixture of both, right? In a context especially where we know that the ANC-led government has had multiple people asking for those abandoned mines to be cordoned off, at the very least, so that they're not breeding grounds for this kind of vulnerability. The minister yesterday conceding that police knew that that particular area was in fact dangerous, and he then suggested that what the crew could have done potentially was to alert the police station that they headed there to film this. But again, that's more a secondary issue. The primary issue is why we weren't able to stave off that kind of crime from taking place to begin with. But there's also matters of economic transformation that we need to discuss, Dumaule, especially in the context of that protest that you were watching yesterday just outside. How members, many of them who work for SARS, but also a few members of the ANC, once again bringing to the fore their plight around salaries. Yeah, the plight around salaries, and members of SARS are saying that they worry about what is going to happen in terms of the pensions and what will happen in terms of the salaries, in terms of government saying that it cannot afford to give and guarantee certain salary increases. Many are saying with the economic pressure that they're feeling, it's almost impossible to get by, and therefore they expect that government will do more. Of course, there's issues of retrenchments as well, but also the members of the other unions who joined. Of course, you have the nurses there as well. You have members of other unions, including those that work for utilities like Eskom, saying that there's a whole host of issues, and at the bottom line, it is the privatization, or what they want to stave off, because they're seeing all these utilities and state-owned entities being privatized in order to try to cut the fat, so to speak, and to ensure that they are functioning at an optimal and doing what they're meant to do, instead of just stagnating with large wage bills. But in a country which is really still in a transformative stage, trying to bridge the gap between the haves and the have-nots, there's something that unions saying the state can ill afford to, so they have to ensure that they rescue and turn around these state-owned entities, because once the employment levels breach further than they are right now, it then goes back to what we were talking about even further social degradation with unemployment and the crime that comes thereof, and of course the social degradation. Absolutely. Tabang Magwaitla yesterday conceding that the unemployment levels in this country are in fact a ticking time bomb, another phrase we've heard several times. Dumalo Mutadi, thanks very much indeed. Plenty to look forward to on what we expect to be, once again, a day filled with a lot of robust debate among ANC delegates who, by the way, by the looks of things, are yet to arrive in a context where that schedule was meant to begin officially at around 9 o'clock. So once again, just to place what we're expecting today, most of the sessions are going to be closed across all 8 commissions. Some of them are peace and stability, economic transformation, what they call the balance of forces and digitization. We then expect the chairs of those subcommittees sporadically to give us media briefings to get us a sense of what they tabled to the particular bodies and what the bodies then, or delegates then, responded with in the form of voting into effect some of the resolutions around these policies. So it's going to be a long day, much of it filled with robust debate, and hopefully we'll be able to bring to you a sense of why it matters throughout the course of the day.
Yeah, absolutely, and hopefully it moves the dial insofar as those important issues facing the country. Ayanda, Nyathi, my co-anchor, thanks very much indeed. Live to us there from Nasrec with Tumali Matlaudi, part of our team covering day 2 of the ANC's policy conference.